Hey, this is Jason the PT, and today I'm talking about the long leg theory of tissue degeneration. So basically, these are people that have had degenerative things: plantar fasciitis, a degenerative meniscal tear, sacroiliac joint dysfunction, degenerative hip labrum dysfunction, lumbar spine disc flattening. If any of those sound familiar and you don't have a real like, aha, I fell down, I picked up a pallet of bricks, this video is for you, okay? This gives you a better idea of how you got hurt and what you need to do or look for in your physical therapy to get you right and get you back to where you need to be. So the long leg theory of pain, of tissue degeneration, basically states that ankle and hip in the lower extremity, those are hard surfaces. And when they don't do their job, they create a functionally longer leg, meaning that the bones aren't longer, but because of their lack of joint mobility, they will create a functionally longer leg. Once that starts occurring and it's being used, especially with walking, with running, repetitive activities, it will ask a softer, more yielding tissue, like I named before, to make up that difference, to normalize it. There's excessive amounts of stress there. I'm going to start with the ankle because the ankle is the easiest. And by the way, ankle sprains are common, very common, and they're often not treated 100% well. We deal with the tissue inflammation, that goes down, the patient goes back into doing stuff, and all is seemingly well in the short and maybe near term. But long term, I think it actually creates problems, and this is why. So, most people at their ankle will have 35 degrees of ankle plantar flexion, and they'll have about 20 degrees of ankle dorsiflexion. Now, an ankle sprain or roll will actually limit the ability for the joint to glide backwards, so they may not be able to get much past zero, let's say straight up and down. What does that do? Well, that when you walk, your foot comes down and you should be able to glide all the way through that range of motion, and the heel comes up as you're pushing off, okay? But if you're lacking ankle mobility, you'll step as you're coming through, you'll pop up over the ankle because it lifts up. So this creates a functionally longer leg. Watch the top of my head. If I walk with my toes somewhat pointed, I come up and over the leg. It's not a lot, but I have to come up and over that. So that upward acceleration plus my body weight coming down creates compression, or maybe even a shearing force to normalize that leg, because that upward force accelerating my body up, my body wants to stay down, so then you get this coming up. Every time I have to come up over that tissue, it compresses it. And over time, it breaks it down. So this is what I would call the uncompensated phase. I have not compensated through any of those softer tissues, so I may vault up and over that leg. Now, over time, one of those softer tissues, plantar fascia, meniscus, sacroiliac joint, hip labrum, lumbar spine, softer tissues will start to compress. Why one goes more faster than another, or why one compensates another one, I'm not 100% sure. It could be a bunch of different factors. But one of these tissues generally starts to become the compensatory mechanism. It starts to compress, it yields faster, and it starts to compress. So you go from uncompensated, vaulting over the leg, to then compensated. And that may mean my knee kind of comes in. If I turn the knee inwards, you can see I shorten, my body falls down, but it creates excessive amounts of shearing and compression on the meniscus. Or lumbar spine flattening. How many people have back problems? 85% of people at some point in their life will have back pain. The other 15% are lying, believe me. The discs are another place. They're actually built to be not only for spinal mobility, but they're also part of your shock absorption system. You need these systems to absorb shock, just like springs in cars. So over time, in that compression, all of a sudden you'll go into the compensated phase, where whatever tissue that's compensating gets you down to the point where it normalizes that gait. So for example, if I compress, if I turn the knee in, all of a sudden you'll notice I have a much more fluid, non-bobbing gait, and you're in the compensated phase, and it holds. It will work for a time. That tissue will hang on and take that excessive amounts of stress, and that normalizes the gait pattern. Now, you have to remember that excessive amounts of stress means your body has to deal with it to heal it over and condition it, or just try to heal it over, and it will hold. How long does it hold? Depends on a couple different things. How conditioned the patient is, what they're doing, how much are they asking of that tissue. If someone is walking the dog a few times a day and they're doing maybe 3,000 steps, the compensation mechanism should likely hold if the patient is healthy, because they're not asking too much of it. But Let's say they start a running program and they have these compensatory mechanisms. All of a sudden they go from 3,000 steps a day to 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 steps a day. Now your body is taking that micro, repetitive, and relentless stress and having to deal with it more because it's amplifying with the increased amounts of ask. So over time, during that compensation phase, it continues to put that excessive amounts of stress. And then all of a sudden, one day, you're just doing whatever it is people do. I came off my 3-mile run. I got up out of a chair. I went to bend over to pick up a pair of socks off the ground, something seemingly benign. And all of a sudden, boom, now we have pain. And it makes no sense. But you have to remember, it's not an explosive trauma. It's low-load, micro-repetitive stress that gradually eroded the tissue to the point of failure. And at that point, the patient has become overcompensated. That tissue that's been doing that excessive amounts of work and has been hanging on finally caved. And then the pain starts. And that patient is now moved into the overcompensated phase. So they went from uncompensated to compensated to overcompensated. That leg has now actually shortened and broken through. So the ankle is a perfect example because you can see it better. Hip is a big one. Hip internal rotation shortens a leg. So if I stand here and I just internally rotate my leg, it comes up off the ground. It shortens the leg. It pulls the leg up as it internally rotates. I can't externally rotate because it lengthens the leg. You can see the heel coming down. So if I walk on an externally rotated leg, you'll notice I come up and over it again. It's not as big as the ankle, but it has that same mechanism. But because back pain is so prevalent, what I often find is a lack of that hip internal rotation. And because of proximity, the lumbar spine ends up doing the work. That's the disc, L5-S1. Most people have problems with disc flattening, disc herniations, all of that. It's because it's compensating for a hip because you're vaulting up and over it and having to come back down. So instead of coming up and over that hip, people will do a kick out. They'll kick that hip out and that will normalize the leg length, but it compresses that lumbar disc on that side. And if you keep doing it over time, it finally leads to erosion, degeneration, and finally failure. And that's why people get hurt. But it's that long leg theory. And it's important because this is one of those things you have to understand how the problem came about. Because most of the time, if we skip over this part of understanding what's going on and understanding that the tissue that's broken, it was actually a compensatory mechanism and it didn't just go rotten, your therapy makes it's a lot harder to get to where you want to be. Because if this keeps going, whatever you do for rehab, tissue healing, all of that stuff still has to compete with this. So now people get into that tug of war. And that's everybody that I did therapy, I did my stuff, whatever it was, and I never really got there. Because we're trying to heal you with whatever we're doing, the exercises, all of this good stuff, but we haven't taken away what was causing the problem. It's equivalent to just painting over your ceiling when there's a leak. It's not really going to do anything, and you're going to be in a war with the roof leak, and you don't want that. That breakdown is outpacing your body's ability to heal back. So it becomes a tug of war. And I think that's what we need to understand, is that the degeneration is a compensatory mechanism that is outpacing your body's ability to heal. And without understanding why things occurred meaningfully, it makes it really hard to get them where they need to go because it's a competition. But that's effectively the long leg theory of pain, the 1,000-foot overview of it. Hope you found that helpful. Please like and subscribe to the rest for my channel, and I look forward to seeing you guys at the next video. Thanks a lot.